right, welcome everybody to the second episode of the Leftist Film Analysis Podcast, where a couple of leftists analyze films and try and extract political meaning from them from a leftist perspective. We are your hosts. I am Mike.
I'm Mitchell.
And we're happy to be here, and we appreciate you tuning in to hear about the shape of water today. We are brand new, so please follow us on Twitter at Film Leftist and on our Facebook page titled simply The Leftist Film Analysis Podcast. We will be on iTunes very soon, where we would love a review and rating as well. We're just trying to do our part to build up the community of leftists that exists online and out there.
Yeah, and speaking of the community of leftists out there, want to give a shout out to Brett O'Shea from Revolutionary Left Radio and the Guillotine Podcast. He gave a follow to us on Twitter today and liked some stuff that we managed to post, and
we think they're super cool. So.
Yeah. For any budding leftist out there that doesn't know about Revolutionary Left Radio, it's a hell of a site and a podcast to listen to if you're not really sure where you fall in your tendency. Brett does a lot to bring a lot of different tendencies to the forefront and let everybody get their word out and specifically talk about that. So we just wanted to thank him and really just plug him and go follow him and listen to him. He's great. He's doing a lot of work for the leftist community.
Absolutely, and he had a lot of influence on our decision to do this podcast.
Absolutely,
because I believe he did some analysis of films as well here and there on his podcast, and so we want to, of course, credit him with a lot of influence and on us.
Yeah.
So. All right, as we said, today we're going to be talking about The Shape of Water. Great film, made in 2017, won Best Picture at the Academy Awards.
Well deserved.
Of course. It also won, they recognized Guillermo del Toro for Best Director.
Mm-hmm.
Well deserved, and we're super excited about that. It was one of my favorite films of the year. And I thought it was just a beautiful film. It had a lot of great writing, directing. It's very well shot. It just looked great. And I think it also best score and best original score and production design are two other awards I think it picked up. And It was nominated for I believe 13 awards.
Isn't the record like 14?
I believe so.
That's a hell of a milestone.
I was hoping it would break it, but
so was I.
But yeah, I think La La Land had 14 last year, I believe, and that I think is either the record or ties for the record. But Shape of Water was a great one. I've seen it once.
I've seen it twice.
Yeah, I'm still hoping to see it at least one more time soon. Written and directed by Guillermo del Toro. Starring Sally Hawkins, Michael Shannon, Doug Jones, and Octavia Spencer. Also starring Richard Jenkins, who did a great job.
I loved him so much in that movie.
And he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his role.
Also well deserved.
Absolutely.
I mean, there wasn't any category that it was wrongly there for.
No.
It excelled in everything.
Yeah, I thought it was great. So I'm going to read you the plot real quick, according to IMDb, just to give you an overview here. This specifically is from Fox Searchlight Pictures. From master storyteller Guillermo del Toro comes The Shape of Water, an otherworldly fable set against the backdrop of Cold War-era America circa 1962. In the hidden, high-security government laboratory where she works, lonely Eliza, Sally Hawkins, is trapped in a life of isolation. Eliza's life is changed forever when she and co-worker Zelda, played by Octavia Spencer, discover a secret classified experiment. Rounding out the cast are Michael Shannon, Richard Jenkins, Michael Stolbarg, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Doug Jones. All great.
Yeah.
There are obvious political undertones here about belonging and inclusion. These are woven throughout, whether just to do with Elisa and the creature, the fish creature, I guess we'll say, or with Elisa's best friend who understands her best, who is played by Richard Jenkins, and his name is Giles. He feels like he's an outsider as well. And upon finally seeing the creature, he refers to the creature as being beautiful. This is set in Cold War era, U.S. in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's a time and place with many issues regarding race and gender, different things. So
and homosexuality too, because that becomes a minor little issue in a scene.
Right. As Giles, I believe, that's kind of his role. He identifies as a gay man in the 1960s,
Sure.
but not openly. Alyssa Wilkinson at Vox.com calls it, quote, a beautiful adult fairy tale. All right, so we're going to jump into it here. One of the first things that I notice in the film is worker alienation is present.
Yeah. Extensively, I would say.
Yeah. There's it's almost centered around a lack of inclusion in a lot of different ways, but especially a separation or a disconnect between Elisa and Zelda, her friend that works with her, and the work that they do at the top secret facility. So, in order to discuss this in context, I'd really like to go back to the words of Karl Marx and read a little bit of what he had to say on the topic of worker alienation, so that we're making sure that we're on point here and we're contextualizing properly. This is a quote from manuscripts page 15. Quote, "He does not fulfill himself in his work, but denies himself, has a feeling of misery rather than well-being, does not develop freely his mental and physical energies, but is physically exhausted and mentally debased. The worker, therefore, feels himself at home only during his leisure time, whereas at work he feels homeless. His work is not voluntary, but imposed, forced labor. It is not the satisfaction of a need, but only a means for satisfying other needs." And that, I think, speaks to a lot of the elements in the film.
Oh, yeah.
Here is a second quote from Karl Marx, manuscripts page 16. Quote, "Since alienated labor alienates nature from man, and 2, alienates man from himself, from his own active function, his life activity, so it alienates him from the species. For labor, life activity, productive life, now appear to man only as means for the satisfaction of a need, the need to maintain physical existence. In that type of life activity resides the whole character of a species, its species character, and free, conscious activity is the species character of human beings. Conscious life activity distinguishes man from the life activity of animals." End quote.
I think that mainly applies, largely applies rather, to Richard Strickland's character, because rather than taking time to find the beauty in this amphibious man creature thing, he's all about finding out like what makes it work and tick, and like he doesn't appreciate like anything of its natural beauty. It's and he's at odds with it because he's more concerned about doing his job rather than anything else.
Right, rather than the natural state of this amphibious being,
Right.
fish-like being. I'm not sure. I've heard them referred to many different ways.
Well, specifically in the subtitles, they referred to him as an amphibious man.
Okay,
So
let's go with that. Let's go with that.
All right.
Yeah, he's really driven by Michael Shannon's character, that is.
Richard Strickland?
Richard Strickland is really driven by his superiors putting pressure on him and commanding officer, I guess it was.
Yeah, General Hoyt.
Right.
Suppose we won't stray too far into that yet. But yeah, it's definitely those are the two most obvious comparisons that we can take from Marx and then apply to this film.
Absolutely. Main character Eliza Esposito, who is an orphan and mute, played by Sally Hawkins, is clearly alienated and removed from what is going on in the lab that she works at, along with Octavia Spencer's character, Zelda Fuller. Throughout the film, she's looked down upon and ordered around. I know at one point there is... and disclaimer here, we may be talking about a few things that are involve things that are a little bit graphic or involving blood and different things that happen in the film. So there is a situation in which they are asked to clean up a bunch of blood.
Yeah, after the amphibious man creature bites off two of Richard Strickland's fingers, which later becomes a even more prevalent point that we can get into. But yeah, and they're ordered to do it in 20 minutes, and it's just a ridiculous amount of blood. I mean,
all over the floor. And
yeah,
pools of it.
In the corners, and I mean, just imagine how much somebody can bleed from having two fucking fingers bitten off,
right.
and the amount of blood that would entail then having to clean up.
And they're not told what's going on, and it's kind of implied that it's just above their pay grade, and they're just needed, they just need them to take these orders and clean up this mess, and that kind of thing in general can alienate you and kind of take a toll on how you view your work and yourself and the role in which you play it.
Yeah, you begin to look at yourself as meaningless.
Right. Right. The way in which that they're treated is almost just they're used and as just tools to an end, and this can be certainly in this situation that can be a jarring thing for anyone to see or have to deal with, and giving no background or context or anything, just go in and clean up these pools of blood, probably for very little pay. And it's probably worth noting that these two women in the 1960s were probably paid less than even what their male counterparts would be for the job.
Yeah.
But they were looked down upon greatly, and I know you have some experience in the custodial and janitorial services field.
Yeah, so. Unfortunately, I do, and it was something I could easily relate to because it's kind of a side job for me at the moment, and I don't get paid nowhere near enough to deal with some of the shit that I had, quite literally, some of the shit that I have to. But I mean, people still want to. There are people who do look down upon it, which certainly makes me feel like worse about myself because I don't want to tell anybody I clean up after people because there's a certain stigma that comes with it.
There is. And there's the whole thing where it's super shitty. Have you ever been somewhere and someone drops something or litters or does something like that and says that they're creating jobs by doing that?
Oh, fuck them.
That
seriously,
somebody's got to clean it up.
Yeah,
somebody has it's somebody's job to clean up. It's not. you're not doing something for humanity or for society by being a dickhead and
oh well, somebody's going to clean it up. I'm providing them a job.
Right.
Fuck that mentality.
Yeah.
Because that same person will also turn around and be like, "You're just a janitor.
Right.
What are you doing with your life?"
Yeah. That's good insight, and we appreciate that. But she's looked down upon, and she's ordered around. She's given these tasks and unreasonable time frames in which to complete them, which I think probably all of us can relate to.
Sure.
You know, I mean, that's the way deadlines are stressed at a job, at most jobs. It's, you know, it puts unnecessary stress on the workers, and I'm sure we can all relate to that.
Yep.
And just being, you know, feeling that pressure. This is, you know, all of course why she relates to this amphibious being, because this creature is alienated in a sense. They are ripped out of their environment by Agent Strickland, I guess.
Yeah, because he specifically said he chased him in South America. I want to say.
Yeah, I believe so. And he pulled him out of his amphibious environment and brought him to this facility to be poked and prodded and to have tests run on them and and
I think it another point is what a stark temperature change. He went from the South America where it's could either be right at the equator, below the equator. So it just went from South America to a warm and hot place to fucking Baltimore,
right,
where it's quite cold,
and just really took them right out of their element, and for, you know, to be poked and prodded at for military or maybe down the road some sort of private gain. Regardless, it was a pretty inhumane action on the part of Agent Strickland.
Yeah, he seemed to rather enjoy it too.
Yeah, unfortunately so, and I think that, you know, that's another facet of this is that you know, he's a government official, and how many times does the government employ people to do these tasks of, whether it's, you know, killing people in the Middle East, or whether it's, you know, this kind of thing in this fictional sense, to do, you know, the dirty work that is really inhumane, and it's really a shame that these people are also taken out of their environment and forced into these situations, where they have to commit these actions that really one would struggle with, and then justify the treatment, you know, or the killings or whatever, because it's for the greater good of, you know, U.S. safety or security.
Yeah, in the name of democracy.
Right. Yeah, we do try to spread a lot of democracy around.
Far too often, unfortunately.
Yeah, it never seems to go well. But a lot of that, you know, pressure we talked about is felt by Giles's character as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Eliza's best friend.
He apparently used to work for an art company or maybe an advertising company.
Yeah, something along those lines.
And he's asked to draw a picture of a family, I believe, eating Jell-O.
I think so.
And
because they talk about the colors of the Jell-O.
Right, and that was such a tiny little change that I'm getting ahead of myself here accidentally. So the Giles goes to meet this former boss of his, maybe. They don't really establish who this man that Giles meets with is, but
he's trying to get him some work, I think.
Right.
You
yeah.
know, they used to work together, and Now Giles is
maybe like a manager.
Yeah, Giles is no longer there, but this guy still is, and he may have tasked Giles with some sort of something to draw.
Yeah,
this
maybe
thing
as
up
a way back in.
Yeah, or maybe like just on a freelance basis, you might call it, or
Sure.
something to get him some money or some work. But
he takes this super well drawn photo or picture back to this guy, and the guy's like, "Oh, this is great, this is fantastic, but we need the green Jello this time."
Yeah.
So he has to completely redo the whole entire picture.
Pre-Photoshop.
Yeah. This was also like clearly in the '60s, and you just can't go back and edit something like that, or even repaint over it, because I mean
because then the quality might suffer, and then they may reject it altogether or something. I mean,
so
you just don't know.
There's just always this ever-changing growing of demands that are just impossible to meet for some businesses, and it just that also works to alienate these people, because they eventually feel like, well, I just can't do anything fucking right for these people.
And the demands change almost what seems on a whim, because there's a lot to be said for the fact that very often the people making these changes and these demands at the top are not the people who have to go redraw the shit. So, that's why it can be changed on such a whim, and it's not a big deal to them. But it's
it's a paycheck for the person that has to do it.
Yeah, or it's not, and it could be the difference between a paycheck or not,
right?
Or a way back into this company, and you've got to think about the time spent, the labor spent on this this work that he also cannot call his own, really, because it's being so.
It's for somebody else,
right?
And
it's just like in the quote from Marx, where it's just to fill other needs, so far down the line and disconnected from you and your own work, that it's kind of disheartening.
Yeah, and it's he's drawing it for somebody else, and then that somebody else is like, it's not good enough. We need something else.
Right, and it's all based on a big question mark. There's no we are commissioning you to do this, and here here is some sort of money or here are some resources or anything like that.
Right.
It's completely
it's all at his expense, and then he gets nothing out of it.
Right. So it's a big question mark as far as the compensation for the labor and for everything as well, and so it just shows how disconnected workers can be, and workers can be producing these things that are valuable and that are good, and it can still be bastardized and manipulated in ways that can affect the worker and alienate the worker in the name of capital and profit, and these are orders sent down from in this case some group of people around a table at the top of this building,
right, and we never meet the guy that's heading this art or advertisement company, and that's how
and he sent this person that Giles knows to be the messenger too,
right?
So.
Yeah, which is I mean it's to that day this way that you don't even get to meet the person that's like saying, nah, your work's not good enough for us. But ultimately, I mean, you, me, Mike, and Giles in the movie, he concedes and is like, well, okay, I guess I'll do it again.
Right, because that's the kind of design we're working with and the kind of positions that we're in, and that this system puts workers in. But it's also obviously Agent Strickland is the antagonist in the film. But it is, and so I don't want to sympathize too much with him. But it is, it's worth noting that he has that same pressure, and obviously it drives him to great lengths throughout this film, and that is not in the sense of a corporation or something or a business, but in the sense of the military and his commanding officer giving him orders and everything coming down the chain of command, and so it's everywhere, and it's an issue, and it is something. It is a kind of one of the many tools, I guess we'll say, used to kind of oppress the workers and further that design of keeping things at arm's length, and keeping the workers distant enough from the top of the corporation or chain of command or whatever,
right,
to where they can't always
And we can go a step further by alienating the workers from the other workers, because as we saw in the film, Jaws has only this possible manager to deal with, so his anger isn't going to be directed at the person that that ultimately gave the command. It's going to be at the person that he can face and deal with, and then we see. And
there's nothing that person can do either. So So he really just has to live with it.
Yep.
And be at the mercy of it.
We see Zelda. Most of the times, it seems that Eliza can never be on time at work. Rather than being mad at the company for enforcing such, you can never be late. And the workers
kind
are
unreasonably strenuous or just
so
lack of understanding on the side of.
Right. So one of the fellow employees of Eliza and Zelda doesn't take kindly to Zelda allowing Eliza to skip in line to check her time card in. So it's alienation from the work itself, from nature, and then fellow employees, because
it pits them against one another in a sense, and I think a lot of us have experienced that as well, where it's like instead of being able to band together and show solidarity as a workforce, or unionize, or whatever example you'd like to, whatever way you'd like to take it, companies do a lot to try and separate that and make each worker very individual, and kind of separate those things out. And I know there are plenty of big companies that I've interviewed for or worked for, and I've heard this from others as well, that show anti-union videos as part of their training programs, or indoctrination processes, and it's just like we're not anti-union, and we're not against your rights. We just are such a good company that you as an individual don't need to band
which is
together,
total bullshit.
right? Don't need to band together with your fellow workers. Just it's just between this great company and yourself, and we're going to do so right by you that you'll never have to even think about that, or pursue anything like that. And it just discourages those things, and that's a modern day example. But I'm sure that's just something that persists from decades past as well. But that kind of discouragement and unionizing and showing solidarity with the other workers. But yeah, it does, because also that is, it's hard to blame the other worker, though, because they're saying, well, if this inconveniences me and my paycheck and my the food on my table or whatever, because it's just that design, and so it's it unfortunately there are things that pit workers against one another, and kind of make it an individualist kind of out for number one, just looking out for me kind of thing, and that's purposeful.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's no doubt about that. It's designed to pit us against each other, and then you bring in and race and
Right.
and then you can bring in sexual orientation and
Right.
why does this person get this kind of preferential treatment just because of his skin color and
Right.
and that's the corporations whispering this shit in the workers' ear, and they're like, yeah, because they don't know any better, because they don't have time to educate themselves.
Also, you stay too busy and too damn tired to go out and make shit happen in the streets or where
Right.
else. So you can't be part of the revolution if we're always keeping your ass clocked in. Moving on from worker alienation a little bit, because that is a really kind of extensive topic.
We could sit here for hours and talk
and
about.
especially with this film, there's a lot to go over in that respect. But let's talk about toxic masculinity a little bit, because that is an issue that is plaguing our society right now.
Yeah, still to this day.
And in this country where there are a lot of repressive views, there are a lot of people with these ideas that of what makes you masculine or what makes you a certain way, and you these gender roles and stereotypes that you have to fit within in order to operate in a society such as this, and it really causes a lot of like repression, and it causes a lot of distance, I think, from a lot of other people as well, and from different struggles and movements, because you're unable to accept. You're struggling with your own self and masculinity, and you view others as inferior if they do not fit a certain mold or something, and it can be really damaging and difficult, and we see it a lot in our society right now, and I think we also see a lot of that in Agent Strickland's character.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's
I mean,
eat up with it.
Yeah, he's consumed by it to the point that I mean, there's just so many examples. I think I don't know if one outweighs the other, but one stood out to me the most, where him and his wife are having sex. And this is just after, fresh after he has the operation to try to put his fingers back on, and they're still in the process of like trying to reattach to his body
After they were bitten off in the lab,
right
by the amphibious.
Yeah. He does something that to re-injure them, and he's got this gauze around it, and he starts. He's on top of his wife, his hand starts bleeding, and his wife is, while he's still having sex, his wife is like, "Oh God, your hand, it's bleeding, stop!" And he doesn't pay her any attention. He just immediately like puts the bleeding hand that he doesn't even notice, because he won't take time to listen to his wife, probably because it's a woman and he has no interest in what she's saying. He puts his hand that's bleeding over her mouth, and we can only assume that he starts bleeding into her mouth, which is just fucking gross.
And he also, it's kind of like I think it alludes to the fact that he has made passes to and made sexual advances toward Eliza, also, who is mute, and so
he does specifically say, I think he appreciates her muteness.
Yeah, and so that's a whole
that's scary
issue there in
yeah.
itself, but he also wanted to put his wife in the role of Eliza in a sense to kind of, I guess, vicariously experience Eliza.
Oh shit, that's a super good point. I didn't think of that, dude.
Yeah. He wanted her to be mute as well because he was not able to advance upon Eliza the way that he had hoped, and so he just fills that role with his wife and doesn't give her an option or a choice in any of that.
Yeah,
That's
a super good point. And this was before, or this is after he tells his wife that he's really thinking about wanting to get a Cadillac, which he eventually later on in the film he does to improve his self-image, obviously his masculinity,
right.
And not only that, his position in life to reaffirm people, I've got a fucking Cadillac,
right.
So I'm up there, I'm living the high life. Because, I mean, you got to imagine this is the 1960s where Cadillacs, I mean, they're still looked at as a high society member.
Right. It's indicative of a certain class.
Sure. But back then, Cadillac was probably the top of the line, whereas there's multiple brands now that you can get that kind of signifies where you are financially. And
he felt the need to. I think, it can be said, there's a lot to be said for the fact that things were kind of unraveling in his professional life.
Yep.
And so he had to start clamping down and gripping tighter the things
that he could control.
That he could in his personal life, like showing his status as a successful man with a Cadillac, and
right,
and kind of forcing his own way upon his wife, and that's something that toxic masculinity kind of furthers, as those stereotypes and those ideas and those roles. We see a lot of gender roles and stereotypes, and kind of furthered in that way, and it just that there's a kind of a right wing set of politics or ideas that further that and kind of exacerbate all of that, and there's homophobia involved and misogyny, and
then when something goes wrong, such as the creature being liberated from the place, and General Hoyt totally just dresses him down, despite he even says, like, I've delivered every single time before this. This is my own one and only failure. So that means that I get a second chance, right? And General Hoyt's he doesn't have any of it. He's like, a man has a decency to not fuck up. So you're supposed to do your job right, and
it's
never...
it's about like, I don't care what you did for me yesterday. What can you do for me today?
Right,
that's gone.
yeah.
Forget about that. What can I use you for today?
And that leads to Strickland going to the bathroom and yelling at himself. He says, "You deliver, That's what you do, right?" And it's a really well acted scene by Michael Shannon. He's a super good actor, but you could just tell, like, he was insecure with himself because he failed just one time, and that's not supposed to happen.
Right. It's written all over him in this film, and it's it's not hard to see him and those ideas, as well as kind of the antagonist and the more liberating or and inclusive ideas being kind of the linked with the protagonists in the film, who see themselves as outsiders.
There's a scene where it eventually becomes useful in the liberation of the fish man, that the employees turn up this camera. They use a stick to turn up the camera so that they can take extra smoke breaks. Do what you want. Steal as much time as you can, because they're stealing every second you're at work. They're stealing from you.
Yeah, there's there's a lot more labor and value that you produce than you receive. And as leftists, I think we know that, and that's what we're fighting against. Moving forward, there are just a lot of general themes of, inclusivity and Giles's character relating to the amphibious man in a way, because he feels as an outsider as well as there's a gay man in that time, and he doesn't feel he can really express himself.
Because there's a specific scene where there's two scenes, but specifically the second one, he's in the diner getting some pie. He really likes the pie from this particular diner. And this
does he? I don't know. It's kind of gross, right? Like
according to
Elisa tries it, but
he seems to like it.
Yeah, or he goes there just maybe to see this person.
Maybe, yeah. He did end up.
He ends up there.
Yeah, having some feelings for the guy, which are ultimately rejected, and he is thrown out, not like physically or anything.
He refuses service to the man at the diner refuses service to an African American couple, right?
Yeah, and then kind of hypocritically, I don't know if Del Toro was pointing at a hypocrisy of the South in the time, but it's supposed to emulate this Southern feel by the diner man saying, "Y'all come back now, you hear?" Which it's a traditional phrase down here in the South it's a customary goodbye,
right?
From people who.
It's almost as if he was placating them or something, or kind of. Maybe it was even sarcastic.
Yeah, and so then he does that, and moments before that, Giles misinterprets Diner Guy's signals, thinks that maybe there's some interest there, and then Diner Guy totally freaks out and is like, "Whoa, no, you need to get the fuck out of here." So that unfortunately Giles just has a problem with feeling like he don't belong as well.
Right, and
which is it's a recurring theme in the whole movie.
Certainly. I would like to actually quote Guillermo del Toro here on that note. Guillermo del Toro told NPR, quote, "I feel that the world is turning into a vicious, really nasty place to live because we have enthroned cynicism instead of intelligence. And every time we talk about emotions, we do so very guardedly and with the fear of appearing disingenuous," end quote. And see, that is kind of where, when he's talking about being guarded about emotions and feelings, I think that has a lot to do with Agent Strickland's character as well, because and that masculinity and that
nobody wants to feel vulnerable.
Yeah, and so I think Del Toro, obviously knew he was putting that in there, and very wisely and expertly did so. To continue what Del Toro told NPR, quote, "I wanted to make a completely honest, heart on the sleeve, non-ironic melodrama in which we talk about falling in love with, quote unquote, the other, as opposed to fearing the other. Which is what we face every day in news and politics and so forth," end quote. So that's obviously he's expressing that a lot of this is intentional. Again, we don't want to tell people what exactly the directors or writers were thinking or anything, or what to get out of this, but this is just a lot of what we got out of it, and him saying that some of this was in there intentionally. Just to finish these words from Del Toro out, quote, "I'm an immigrant. I feel these things acutely in one way or another, and it just so coincided that we are on the wrong side of history individually, but on the right side of history for this still to come," end quote. So that is what Guillermo del Toro told NPR regarding a lot of these elements in the film, and I think it's really important that he was, and really interesting and really great that he was aware of so much of what he was putting in to this film, and that he did it so expertly that it came across very well, and that we've been able to spend an hour talking about it.
Yeah, and we weren't even able to touch on probably our hero, the Soviet spy.
Yeah.
That
And him being able to see.
he understood the beauty of the creature, and was a proponent of keeping it alive. I guess that's really all we'll touch on him. I mean, that's pretty much a given.
Yeah.
If you've seen the film. Yeah, Dr. Hofstetler.
Yeah, Comrade Hofstetler. We unfortunately he was killed in the film, but
he died.
But he was in a tough position as well.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot you could delve into there, but overall, I think it was a great film.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really enjoyed it.
I loved it.
And I think that a couple of things that I just thought were really made sense to me. I don't know if we touched on this, but at one point, Eliza says, I believe she's talking to Giles, and she says, quote, "When he looks at me, he does not know I am incomplete," end quote. And that's referring to this amphibious creature, fish being, and how she feels incomplete due to being mute. And Giles relates to that as well, with like we said, feeling an outsider and those things. But I thought that was a good line, and I think it speaks volumes about this film and
absolutely
and the characters in it, and she does eventually find her voice in a black and white scene. Looks really great. Initially, I heard that it was all going to be filmed in black and white.
Well, really?
But the budget wouldn't allow it or something like that. But
I thought it was cheaper to make films in black and white.
I don't know. If anybody has any knowledge of that, please email us at leftistfilmpodcast@gmail.com.
Good plug.
But let us know. But if you know about that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it was supposed to, but I'm not sure. It may not any longer be. It may be a specialty thing now.
Right.
So it's like, because everything's like standard in color. But I think it was a really good thing that the one black and white scene and spoiler alert here, the one black and white scene is where she was able to find a voice, and she was kind of maybe realizing she was in love with this amphibious being, the fish man, at the same time, and it helped her find her voice, and I guess it was some sort of metaphor for that.
Because they go on to do some stuff.
They do, man. They break down some boundaries, I guess, that and it's really, a lot of it's done pretty boldly and fearlessly.
It sure is.
From the perspective of the filmmakers, so kudos, good on them.
Particularly I love the scene where the fish man and Eliza are obviously getting busy, for lack of a better term, in the bathroom where they fill up the whole bathroom with water, and then Giles comes in and opens the door, and all the water comes rushing out, and they're holding each other, and Eliza just gives this look of like, finally I found something that completes me, and she
There's
just
a lot of acceptance there.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful scene as well.
Right, and just to summarize, these things, all of these elements drive. Or just to wrap it up, I guess, all of these elements end up driving Agent Strickland to not do anything with his fingers that are rotting off of his hand, and he ends up working himself to death, quite literally in this sense, and eventually, though, the fish man is liberated and in back in somewhat their natural environment, and Eliza finds a home there as well.
Yeah,
finds belonging. So
I kind of felt bad for Giles
but
because he at first he didn't want to do anything to liberate it because he was more focused on trying to get his job back, which he ultimately decided once the advertisement company finally turned him down for good. He decided to help Eliza and the fish man because Eliza was his only friend. So I did kind of feel bad for him at the end because he was kind of left alone in that sense after still helping him, or her rather.
Anyways, I guess we'll wrap this up.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. Enjoyed the discussion. If y'all have anything to say, hit us up on Twitter at Film Leftist, and let us know what your thoughts are, or email us at leftistpodcast@gmail.com. Next week we will be talking about the film Get Out.
Oh, that's going to be a good one.
Which there's going to be plenty to talk about there. If you have any films you'd like for us to talk about, email us, hit us up on Twitter. But yeah, I think that'll do it. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. We're signing off. This is Mike.
I'm Mitch.
All right, in solidarity, folks. We appreciate you.